My nervous system, respiratory system, and cardiovascular system were out of balance for a while. I dealt with tachycardia or high heart rate. My heart rate would spike all the time and fall. I dealt with respiratory issues, throat closure, anaphylaxis, convulsions every night, sleep issues, food intolerances, weight loss, so many things. It started after I drank a smoothie that I purchased out of the house. And within a couple minutes, I started to experience throat closure for the first time in my life. And I wound up in the hospital. They ended up diagnosing anaphylaxis and tachycardia and putting me on some antihistamines. And ultimately, I didn't get better. So I wound up back and forth to the ER throughout the whole weekend after that. I wasn't able to eat. I had a fever. I was convulsing in the middle of the night. It's very scary. I felt like I couldn't breathe or swallow or, walk or do anything. It was very difficult. I had to have even like water delivered to my apartment because I was too weak to go out and get it. I had to have somebody watch my dog because I was too weak to walk her around the neighborhood. And after several weeks of this, I realized that it wasn't a typical flu or virus that I thought it might be, even though I had tested negative for those things in the hospital. Long story short, it went on for a good 12 weeks until I really turned the first corner. There were a couple different milestones that I went through with this. So the first was probably around week 7 when my appetite came back. So I had been in a calorie deficit that whole time. I was eating, but it was like very simple, plain, low histamine types of things. Pretty early on, I realized that it was probably not a like typical flu or virus. And in that case, it looked a lot like mast cell activation syndrome or something that was more immune and nervous system in nature. So I switched to a low histamine diet. Still, my throat would close almost every time I ate food, though it prohibited me from really eating a lot. Basically, my strategy would be to take tons of different antihistamines throughout the day and introduce food in a very stable, like calm environment where I would be sitting and, relaxed and breathing and getting, my throat muscles nice and open, and then I would eat a couple bites, it would start to close up, and then I would have to stop. And that was kind of my life for a while. My first milestone, as I was about to say, was when my appetite fully came back and I felt like I was able to eat more, and I actually was able to swallow more without as many symptoms. I definitely still had symptoms from swallowing food, but it was starting to improve. And so this was about almost 2 months into the process. I was still exhausted. I was still very dysregulated nervous system wise, like going out in the sun or walking or doing anything like that. Hearing noises, seeing light was all very overwhelming to my system. And basically all I could do was lay on the couch all day and sit in silence and drink tea and take antihistamines. And typically, I would also listen to these binaural beats or like healing frequency sounds from YouTube. And I couldn't listen to like real music or TV or podcasts or anything like that, but I could tolerate this. And then at night, I'd have a hard time sleeping. My legs would be convulsing and shaking in the night. All kinds of weird things would be happening to me. And I would basically just sit on my couch all day, tea, binaural beats, trying to calm my nervous system, and talking to the 7 doctors that worked with me during this time, none of whom were really able to help me. Another kind of milestone I had was around probably 10 weeks was the first time that I was able to exercise and go to a Pilates class. That was a big deal. I was able to travel across the country to be with my family around 12 weeks in, and I started to have days where I wouldn't have any symptoms, which was really, really cool. But then they would kind of come back, and that was also very scary. So I didn't know if I would ever really completely recover, knowing that it seemed to just come in waves. I, at that time, was specifically triggered around my cycle, so my hormones seemed to impact it a lot. I think due to the way that estrogen can increase histamine levels. I was very sensitive to all things histamine at the time. So that seemed to make sense with what I was tracking. And around my birthday, around like 4 or 5 months in, I was able to tolerate, a cocktail, which was exciting. I did have to take a lot of antihistamines to go out to dinner and have a drink, but that was very exciting. I definitely paid for it the next day. But that was a milestone, and it was about 6 months in. So it was like mid-September when I came back to San Diego. I live on the East Coast with my family in the summer, and when I got back and kind of hit that 6-month mark was really where things turned a massive corner, and I felt like I no longer identified as sick. I no longer identified as dealing with mast cell activation syndrome. It felt like it was done. And things did slowly continue to improve from September through now. So over the span of the last 6 months, things, I would say, gradually continued to improve. But I was like 95% better at that point, and that was when I really identified as better. And I share this story only so that if you are somebody dealing with mast cell activation, you have some hope that you can get better. It was very, very scary, and I would say in a lot of ways the symptoms that I dealt with on a daily basis were pretty life-threatening. At least those are, things that they tell you to, seek urgent care for. And so, having your heart rate spiking all the time and having your heart rate be like 140 when you're just sitting still in a quiet room, having your throat closed from eating absolutely anything. It's scary, and having your airway just feel like it's not working. You never feel like you can breathe properly for weeks, for months on end. It was a time that I just really didn't know if I would get through it. And so I share this video for that reason. Also because I want to quickly run through some of the supplements that really helped me. So keep in mind that I did get very, very triggered negatively while I was introducing supplements. I think my body has always been very resilient, where I can eat, I can take different supplements and tolerate them. But during this time, it was not that way, and I would try different things, and I would respond very poorly. So, if you're dealing with this is not advice for you to try these things, but these are some of the things that really did help me. Bicol skullcap, it's a very, very potent mast cell stabilizer, kind of like quercetin, but a lot more potent in my opinion. Quercetin really did nothing for me at the time, so I really didn't continue using it. But Bicol skullcap, or Chinese skullcap, really, really helped me. So I took that. I took Perilla. It's another mast cell stabilizer. I used cod liver oil because of the vitamin A. It helps with the gut lining and things like that. I took aloe vera juice, which is another like kind of antihistamine or mast cell stabilizing, remedy. I did boswellia, again, for the same reason, black seed oil for the same reason. So you can see the theme. I was basically taking things throughout the day, all day long, that would stabilize my mast cells. And I was also reducing histamine from my diet. Anytime I ate, something like fermented or something like that, it would flare me up, and it would last for like 10 days. I would be totally messed up. My heart rate, everything would just get jacked up from that. So at the time I was avoiding those things. I was cooking everything from scratch. I was freezing things. Any leftovers I had, I would immediately freeze so that there was no histamine, that type of thing. So very, very hyper vigilant with my diet, tons of antihistamines with my supplements, and a lot of mast cell stabilizers as well. So yeah, that was, and I did electrolytes, I did vitamin C every morning. I took melatonin and chamomile every single night, which are, again, helpful with histamine, antihistamines. So yeah, I was on just a plethora of stuff. And by like the summer, after like that 3-month mark, I was able to start weaning off of those things. My goal was to try and keep this under 10 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up here. My biggest takeaways are just that I can't help but have so much gratitude for my health every day now, after having gone through something where I didn't know if I would, ever get back to this place. And for you guys, if you're going through something like this, just keep going and know that it can get better, even if you don't know how yet. So